Greetings and salutations. Thanks for clicking on the video and giving me a view. I really appreciate the support. This is going to be my guide on how to be successful in College Hoops 2K8 Legacy Mode. I'm making the video just because some people have asked me in the comments of some of my other videos. There will be things that I probably miss or omit, or things I maybe just don't know about. So if you have any other knowledge to add to this video, do feel free to place that in the comments. But today we will be going over 3 broad topics. The first is going to be the basics of the mode. This is just going to establish kind of like just bare bones of the mode. Basic things you should know about the game mode. Then we're going to go over recruiting strategies, things you can do to be successful when recruiting. Some of this will loosely be discussed in the basics of the mode. We'll also have coaching strategies as well, different templates or systems that I have found that have worked in these videos. I'll be going over those kind of in depth, as well as showing you how to fluidly establish coaching strategies from year to year just based on the roster you have instead of having a system. So we'll have coaching strategies for if you want to have a particular system, like let's say a small ball type of team, or if you just want to recruit the best players year to year and then see how you can edit your coaching strategies to best win with that group of talent. Now, for both the recruiting strategies and the coaching strategies, I will be giving you live examples, so make sure you watch the entirety of the video. To start with the basics, when you begin your legacy mode, you will have a couple of different options for setting up the game. The most important of these will be choosing if you want to do an open legacy or a career legacy. An open legacy allows you to begin the game with any existing coach that you choose. You can also edit the attributes of your players as well as the players on other teams in an open legacy mode. In a career legacy mode, you will create a new coach from the start, and you will start at the bottom and work your way up. As such, you can only choose the worst teams at the smaller conferences in order to begin this career. You can add teams to the list of options in a career legacy by adding the roster for a small conference team that maybe you went to that school, or you just like their logo, or you like their colors, or whatever the case may be. In both modes, we need to address the coaching carousel situation. The carousel is where you will be offered new jobs, and the computer coaches will be offered jobs as well. For the most part, when someone lands a power conference job, they will not be fired unless they are an absolute dumpster fire of a program. This inhibits your ability to get certain jobs later. To give you an example, Billy Donovan leaves, I guess when was that, 2015? But in this game, you don't get the ability to play for Florida until like maybe 2030. And by that time, the game mode's kind of close to being over. Other options here include how many teams you can play with in a legacy, half length, as well as if players can leave early or not. You can also decide if you want to customize conferences as well. Next, you will need to select your school. In either mode, it is important to consider your recruiting base when you select your school. We will cover this later, but it is essentially the geographical region of recruits available to your school. From my experience, New York, California, Texas, and Kentucky are the best recruiting bases in the game. Now that we have selected our school, it is time to allocate our coaching attribute points. In an open legacy mode, you have the ability to max out all of these attributes. In a career legacy mode, you are only allotted X amount of points to begin. In year 2, you will be given a few more points just because, and then from there on out, you will only be allotted points based on achieving certain legacy goals. Now we will explain these attributes and recommendations. For these attributes, offense enhances the team play on this side of the ball, and defense does the same for the other side of the ball. These are usually the last attributes I focus on because they seem to have the least impact. Next up is teaching. This is the second most important attribute as it influences how fast your players will develop. Maxing this out early gives you an edge as you will have better teams than other small conference teams, regardless of recruiting. Scouting is going to impact how much information you reveal about your recruits and your opponents. Charisma is the most important attribute as it maintains player confidence as well as impacting your ability to recruit. It is highly recommended that you max out charisma before touching any other attribute as you will be able to recruit local 3-star players with ease. Lastly is discipline. This is the third most important as it also impacts training and your halftime adjustments. I have also seen this impact simulation performance more than offense and defense will. The full recommendation for coaching attributes is to max out charisma as soon as possible and then get teaching to an A- at least, B+ or A-, and then you want to get your discipline to at least a B- or B before you start focusing on any other attributes. You will also select assistant coaches. You will want to select coaches who have very good charisma, teaching, and discipline attributes, as this will give you access to better players who will develop faster than your competition in these smaller conferences. The attributes for your assistants will be the same, except for they also have another attribute called ambition. These coaches who rate high in ambition tend to improve other attributes faster, but are also more likely to leave for a head coaching job. Now we need to set our schedule. This is important as it directly impacts recruiting in two ways. The first is the number of points you have access to in a week. If you play no games in a week, your coaches have a lot of time to recruit. The more games you schedule in a week, the less time you have to recruit. If you schedule 3 games in a week, you will not have any time to visit recruits. The second impact on recruiting is going to be that you will be unable to visit recruits or have them come visit your campus if you have a game scheduled for Sunday. To get around these issues, you can do one of two things. The first is when you're making your schedule, you can use the calendar app on your phone, or if you have a backlog of calendars all the way back to 2007, you can use those as well. Basically, what you want to do is see what the Sundays are in October, November, and December, and then make sure you don't schedule those just by looking at the dates on the calendar. Then also from Sunday to Sunday, you want to make sure your team is only playing one game, so that way you'll have time to recruit, but you'll still be playing games. The second thing we can do, which is my preference, is you can look at the season tournament date for the O'Reilly Auto Parts A bracket. This is a tournament that is going to be scheduled on the second available Sunday of the season. You can subtract 7 and you get the date of the first Sunday. You can also add 7 to get the remaining dates for the remaining Sundays. For example, in the initial season, this tournament is set as November 11th. If you keep adding 7s to this date, you get November 18th, November 25th, and December 2nd. If you subtract 7, you get November 4th, allowing you an extra week to schedule a game without sacrificing any recruiting time. Now, I will say, if you do use this second method, the numbers will get repetitive because it's pretty much going to be like 4 or 5 sets of numbers. So one I always remember is going to be this one. It's 11, 18, 25, 2. And they'll just kind of run together in your head like sets of numbers. So the more you play the game and do this, it'll become a lot easier. You'll just have to make sure you check that O'Reilly Auto Parts A tournament first. Next, the game will insert you into what I call the preseason. This is basically for ABL scouting. The ABL here can be used to scout high school players by either simulating their games or playing them. Playing them takes a lot of time, so I usually just select the games of the players that I am recruiting and simulate them. Some say playing or recruiting the games of a recruit adds interest in your school from that recruit as well, but that has not been my experience. In this stage, I also like to make my final roster changes as far as my positional needs go. Here, I will also set my first rotation for the season. When you start a season, it is best to never assume that your rotations are properly set. The CPU may do something wacky, like give your best starter 18 minutes a game. I will go more in depth about how I set these rotations later, but generally speaking, you can set your bench depth and then auto-generate the rotations at minimum, and you'll do pretty well. Your coaching profile is going to be one of the most important aspects of Legacy Mode each season, and it also may require you to make adjustments to it throughout the season. Make sure assisted recruiting is on, as it ensures your target list is managed as you simulate. Your recruiting priorities will determine which recruits are sorted to the top and which are sorted to the bottom when you sort them based on their rating or their caliber. This is not an exact science. So for example, potential, you could have both recruiting priorities set to potential, but more or less you're going to get all the 5-star seniors at the top, and then you'll go to 4-star and 3-star. If there's a 3-star player who's in A+ potential, he's not going to show at the top of your list. I'm going to assume that is based on your knowledge of the recruit, because size is something that you always know about the recruits just because you have their height and their weight, and this always accurately lists the recruits. To be honest, I do not know if playbooks matter when simulating. I felt like they have, but I have no real way to quantify it, so I still use them based on my knowledge of the playbooks and what they do in real life. So I'll go over that just in case there is some hidden benefit. Motion offense, you can really use this for any team. It's best for high IQ players because it's basically players making decisions kind of in the moment, as created by Bobby Knight. The box playbook, I kind of think of this as the dribble drive playbook that Coach Calipari would use. So box would be the playbook you would want to run if you had a point guard who is strong in driving, inside scoring, and passing. The 4-out playbook is one you would want to run if you are not running a true big or you're only running one true big. The flex playbook would be for teams with 2 playmaking guards. I think that would be like just so for a roster that's on the game already. If you're playing legacy mode, whenever you get to like year 3 or 4 with Duke, because they have Nolan Smith and John Shire, that's a good playbook to run. It's one I like to run with those guys. The UCLA high post. I'll run this if I have bigs who can dribble and pass and they make good decisions. Stack, I don't really know. I guess if you have big lineups, you can run stack, but that's the one I usually don't use at all. Anybody real quick, if you know the principles and basis of the stack offense, drop them in the comments below. You can also set your defenses. It is important to incorporate some sort of zone, as most scouting reports you are going to get suggest doing this to disrupt dribble penetration. This game in recruiting generates a lot of talented guards, so you will want to disrupt dribble penetration. Full court press is broken in this game, particularly the full court trap and the 1-2-1-1 zone. Full court press can be effective if you are a great defensive team, particularly if you have a great defensive point guard. But you must have depth to run these presses, and especially running them at a high frequency. You could also run a slower offense to maybe mitigate some of this. There are also half-court options available, and they are viable if you want to press, but you have very little depth. The sliders in your coaching profile are going to dictate how your players play. Offensive tempo determines your tempo in the half court. Usually this should only be turned up if you have an experienced point guard who has good offensive awareness and passing and supporting players with these characteristics as well. Defensive tightness determines how much space defenders will give the opposing team. Next, we can determine if we want our players to focus on getting defensive rebounds or running in transition. And lastly, we can decide if we want to focus on getting offensive rebounds or getting back on defense. Also, player development is a big part of this mode. You have bonus drills and you also have weekly training. You get 2 playable bonus drills per week. If you successfully complete a drill, you gain 18% towards a particular attribute. Weekly training provides simulated development. You have 2 training slots for skills and 1 training slot for a conditioning for a player each week. All are good options whenever you're looking at training except for awareness. The only time awareness is useful for training is if you have a player who is developed skill-wise but lacks awareness or consistency. You can also set the training schedule for the entire team at once if you like. This is useful if you are running a system. For example, if I am running a defensive-based program like Tony Bennett at Virginia, I can set 1 team training slot for each week of the season for defense. That way, even if players don't come in quite fitting my system, they grow into it. To round out the basics of the game, we will go over recruiting. First and foremost, we will cover the dates that are going to be most important. During the ABL, you may not contact recruits, only scout. When the season starts, you may contact recruits on day 1. So this would be whenever you have your Midnight Madness, whatever it may be. And it is recommended that you do so to gauge interest. I call this day 0. The next important date is going to be the 2nd Tuesday of the season. You have to simulate that 2nd Monday in order to be able to get access to offer scholarships to players. Whenever you offer scholarships to players, you get an interest boost. So you don't want to recruit that Monday, you want to recruit that Tuesday. So 2nd week, don't recruit on Monday, recruit on Tuesday. This is important as it gives you enough of an interest boost to win a potential recruiting battle in a lot of instances. Next is going to be our Sundays. Make sure they are available whenever you set your schedule. Refer to earlier in the video to figure out how to do this. Now we have the beginning of the early signing period. This period begins on a Sunday that has a player icon on the calendar. It ends the next Sunday with a similar icon that also has a stop symbol as well. This will be your only chance to sign players in season. It is important at smaller schools to seal the deal before bigger schools reallocate their scholarships due to missing out on higher ranked players. For example, I could be a small school, let's say I'm St. Francis in New York, and I'm recruiting a 3-star player who's the number 150 player overall, number 3 center. I have a good chance of getting this guy, but I'm not allocating a lot of resources into him. And the recruiting signing period in season just ended, and I decided, well, now I want to pour everything into him and offer him the scholarship. If I would have done this before, it's a high chance I would have signed him. But I didn't, and now Georgetown missed out on the number 1, 2, and 3 player, and they have 3 scholarships that they can give out. And one of them just so happens to be to my player. This guy wants to play at a big program, so I'm automatically out of the race. Before the last week of the regular season ends is your last opportunity to recruit in season. This time is best used to call it quits in a losing recruiting battle and reallocate your scholarships before other teams do the same to start off-season recruiting. When you enter the recruiting screen, you will notice a lot of players are available. This is because this game allows you to recruit high school seniors, juniors, sophomores, freshmen, and in addition to that, you can also recruit JUCO freshman players, and JUCO sophomore players. JUCO freshman players have 3 years of eligibility remaining, while JUCO sophomore players have 2. You can filter players based on a variety of factors. This helps you narrow your search, and you can also sort players based on interest or caliber. To get more details on a player, you can click in the left analog stick and get more details on the recruit. The most important of these details will be their priorities. This lets you know what they value as a recruit. The main priorities you will see are wanting to be close to home. Players want to play at a school that is closer to their hometown, so you'll have more interest the closer you are to their hometown. Getting good coaching. Players want you to have high coaching attributes. Getting playing time. Players want to play where they are guaranteed playing time the fastest. Feeling wanted. Players want you to have less players on your roster at their position. They also want you to sign less recruits in their recruiting class at their position. And also, if ABL games do boost interest, this would be the priority where how many ABL games you've attended for a player boosts their interest. The last recruiting priority is going to be playing at a big program. These players want to play in big conferences, and particularly for blue blood programs. You can determine if a recruiting battle is winnable using these priorities. You can also see a list of schools the player is most interested in. If you are not at the top of this list for senior players, it is unlikely you will get them to commit unless the other schools you know for a fact are going to be offering their scholarships elsewhere. If you have an interest of 95% or 96% after offering a scholarship, but another team has more interest from that recruit than you, and they also offer a scholarship, they're going to commit to that school over your school. You will know if a school has offered a scholarship because they will have an icon next to their school name on the player's interest page. When contacting recruits with freshman and sophomore players, you can only request game tape. In addition to this, for junior players, you can also call and email them. And also for your junior college and senior players, you can do everything else we've mentioned, but you can also invite them to your campus. You can visit them, or you can go and scout a game that they are playing in. When deciding how to spend recruiting points, remember you only have so many, so prioritize players based on your needs and wants. You can also add players to your target list by pressing the start button. This will help you in prioritizing as well as setting the focus for your CPU assisted recruiting. Now it's time to get into our examples. I have maxed out the abilities of the Kentucky coach and will use them to provide 4 years of recruiting and adaptive coaching strategies. Recruiting strategies, all right. So here we go. I'm going to show you guys how the magic is made. We will start with tips and tricks I did not get to cover in my example. Recruiting generation is guard heavy, so make sure you target centers and power forwards, as they will not be at the top of your recruiting page if you sort by caliber, and you will need big men in the game, so make sure you're making an extra effort to recruit centers and power forwards. As a smaller school or mid-major, be sure to also recruit world recruits and JUCO players. This is an easy way to get productive players, as the computer's generally not going to go after world recruits. The JUCO players is kind of up in the air. I don't really know how they determine which ones they're going to take. Maybe they scout them or what, I'm not really sure. And lastly, if you are at a mid-major or smaller school, you're going to have a lot less points than bigger schools to use for recruiting. For this reason, be sure to use the distance filter to target municipal and local players. These are going to be the players that are closer to you, and they're going to take less points to recruit. If they're further away, they're going to take more points to recruit. Now let's get into year one of recruiting. We'll start in the ABL. Here we will add players to our target list. Once we have done this, we can change our ABL schedule to reflect the recruits we are interested in that we can realistically land. We will place a larger emphasis on senior players for the ABL games, as we need to know how good they are this season because we're looking to bring them in a lot sooner. It is important to keep in mind who plays in what region in your target list. Players on your target list may play each other multiple times in the ABL. If they do, be sure to schedule these games first, as it gives you the opportunity to watch multiple recruits at one game, so freeing up the opportunities for you to watch other targets on your list. Now we're going to get into a little bit of roster management here. Roster management is an important part of being successful in this legacy mode. Basically, we want to ensure we have good players at all times in our target list, and we have all the positional needs of a program covered as well. We will determine that in this screen. Looking at this screen lets me know how many players I have on scholarship for each grade level. Typically, you want to target 2 to 3 extra players than what you already have for a grade level. That way, if you don't get some of the players, you'll have backup recruits. A few things here. First is to place greater emphasis on meeting those numbers for your upperclassmen high school players, as their recruitment is going to be more urgent. So we're going to be recruiting the seniors a lot sooner than we are the freshmen. For this reason, we're going to want to make sure we meet all of our targeting needs for seniors before we do our freshmen. Secondly, you do want to target at least 1 to 2 freshmen and sophomore high school players, as targeting them all 4 years seems to have some impact on your ability to land them later on. And lastly, don't feel you have to target certain freshmen and sophomore players if they aren't your type of player. More players will be added to the recruiting class as they progress throughout the years. I will also need to take into account players leaving early. If a player transfers, you immediately get the ability to reallocate their scholarship in the coming off season. I have a good idea here that number 23, however, is going to leave for the draft. If a player leaves for the draft, you have to wait until the next season of in-season recruiting to be able to reallocate their scholarship. I have a good idea number 23 is going to leave because he's a sophomore with an 87 overall. For this reason, I will be sure to recruit high school juniors, even though there are none on my roster, just in case he leaves early. We only have one talented big, so I will be sure to recruit power forwards and centers in this class as well. Here's a look at our first target list. Here we are at day 0 recruiting. As soon as the season starts, before you do any countdown to madness or whatever, you want to make sure you recruit. It's highly recommended. When the season starts, interest of your recruits is going to be subject to change. Also, after that first week, interest is going to be subject to even greater change. We are no longer in Gastel's top 5, so we may have to let him go if this does not improve. All of our other seniors look good, so we will allocate recruiting points selecting the best players, but also making sure that we're making it a priority to recruit the bigs, as positionally that's what we're going to need the most moving forward. Scholarship Day. We have identified our scholarship targets based on talent and the ability to land them. First is Leslie, as he is the #1 power forward in the country. We seem to have an opportunity to land McNair because his top priority is playing at a big program. And we are Kentucky, Texas, or A&M. They could still get him though, so we have to be wary of that. I have decided we pretty much won't land Noel because he wants to feel wanted and we have a lot of guards already. We will give Gastel one more week. If LSU recruits this center right here, we're pretty much going to be out on him. We wouldn't have a shot at landing. Knowing where you stand is going to be very important when deciding who to offer a scholarship, because you don't want to waste time, which means you're wasting the ability to build interest of a recruit. I have decided to offer all of the viable targets except for Leslie. He's a surefire commit. For this reason, I will use the scholarship boost on the other players that I'm unsure about. Right, we have to reallocate some scholarships. A&M offered McNair, so we are done here. We are out on Arnold as LSU offered. We have identified these centers to take that scholarship. Because LSU is likely to sign Arnold, the top center, our alternative center here also has high interest in LSU. That interest is going to drop whenever LSU signs Arnold. This is going to give us a greater chance to land our alternative choice. We will recruit Gastel for one more week just to see what happens, but I'm convinced he's gone. As expected, Gastel and McNair are gone, and we will give those scholarships to our two centers. Signing day is here. Leslie has committed. We are now allocating his target list space to an underclassman. These other two senior high school centers are likely to sign in the offseason due to interest. It is possible another big-time program offers these guys before the season ends. So we will want to check up on that before the in-season recruiting period ends. Nobody offered these guys, so we will proceed to our off-season recruiting. Our two high school senior centers signed, so now we can allocate their target list spots. Number 23 did leave, so we have an extra scholarship to award next season. So now we will use one of our extra target list spots for a high school junior as well. This is why roster management is an important piece, because if I did not consider him leaving, I would have potentially missed out on an extra scholarship for next season, so I wouldn't be able to get as good a player as I possibly could. Year 2 of the ABL, the majority of our ABL targets played in the Midwest or Central, giving us the chance to scout a lot of players. I feel like you guys pretty much get the gist of ABL here, so I'm not going to come back to it in the next 2 seasons. But just know I will still be selecting the players in my target list to watch their games in the ABL. Day 0, we have 1 scholarship to give from number 23 leaving. With that, we will recruit Greg here. He looks like he's going to be a lock for us, but still we will recruit other seniors just in case he does commit elsewhere. Scholarship days here. We've offered Greg. We will continue to recruit other high school seniors. Signing day is here. Greg has signed, so now we have 2 more target list spots to reallocate. We will target 2 freshmen as we have 3 scholarships that year. Our junior year targets are already selected, so we only need 1 more sophomore year target. Here in the off season, this is the best part of having small recruiting classes or just signing all the guys you want in season. We can just simulate the off season and not have to worry about anything. Here we are, day 0 of year number 3. Here are our high school senior targets. We have 5 scholarships to reallocate. We can just take the 5 highest rated players, but we do need bigs, so we will definitely recruit the power forward and center on this list and then take the top guards. Scholarship day, we have decided to offer the 3 guards at the top of our list and the 2 bigs you see here. We will also add 1 freshman to the target list because we now have a slot available. Signing day, Dallas and the center did not sign. Only Dallas committed elsewhere. We will recruit his replacement throughout the season. I was able to find Lau as a replacement for the Dallas scholarship. Right now, we are his top school, and that can change throughout the year. We also allocated open target list spots to 1 sophomore and 2 freshmen. Here we are in off-season recruiting. The center did not commit, so we will look to replace him with this player instead. Looks like UNC needs more centers for whatever reason, so we will look for a new recruit. And we have settled here on Merrick's as he has committed. Here we are, day 0 of year 4. We have 4 scholarships to allocate. We decided Park would be a long shot and removed him from our target list. Power looks like a lot. The rest of the guys will pretty much be a battle. Don't think that necessarily means they'll be tough battles. Decided to offer Connolly over Ali. UConn was high on both their lists. UConn only offered one of them. By going to their team on the Big East stand-ins, clicking in the right analog stick, and after knowing that they had a limited number of scholarships, or being able to assume that they had a limited number of scholarships, I made my decision to offer Capono, Powers, and Robbins. We will target one more senior in case Robbins goes elsewhere. Here we are in the in-season signing period. Power has committed, UConn committed Ali, and this takes away interest in UConn from Connolly. Capono has signed as well. We will continue to recruit Robbins and Connolly throughout the season. At the end of in-season recruiting, we decided Robbins was gone. He's going to go to LSU more than likely. So we will recruit a world recruit instead. So that is my hands-on take on recruiting. Feel free to offer any suggestions in the comments. Now we get to our different coaching strategies. The biggest part of setting your strategy is deciding what shots players take. To do this, edit your player. Go to the roster management screen and edit your players. You'll scroll down to the bottom, and here you can adjust their tendencies in regards to their shot selection. You will also want to set your rotations according to these tendencies. One example would be my 6-man strategy. In this example, we have a prolific scorer who is not yet a starter. If this guy has a really high, let's say 3-point shooting rating, I will give him 15 to 20 minutes off the bench, turn off his other tendencies, and max out his 3-point shooting tendency. This gives us a high volume shooter at the 3-point line off the bench who can make those shots, so we can add to the firepower of the offense. This can be applied to any and all tendencies for the 6-man strategy. There are a variety of coaching strategies you can choose to use. The main thing is determining if you want to have a system players fit into, or if you want to evolve your coaching strategies to fit the players you recruit. I will go over some key coaching strategies from coaching systems I have developed from the previous career simulations we have already done. First is going to be small ball. Here you will sacrifice defense in order to play really fast with 4 shooters taking hella 3-pointers. The 4 shooters will be accompanied by 1 big who is only there for rebounding and rim protection. You can also adjust sliders, but you must play fast and go for offensive rebounds. Typically in this system, it does not matter who the 4 shooters are. You could play 4 point guards. It would not matter. You just want guys who can shoot. The next system is going to be pace and space. The role of the big in this system is going to be the same, but here you don't necessarily need 4 shooters, but you will want to have at least one player be a stretch 4 in some type of context. So the context of that stretch 4 I prefer is going to be I call it the baby Bron type of player. So think of LeBron earlier in his career. You'll want a guy who's built as a small forward to typically be between 6'6" and 6'11", who can dribble and score at all 3 players. So like a LeBron or Paul George type of player. You could also have a stretch 4, so you could have a power forward who could just shoot 3s. Like maybe a Kevin Love type of player, someone like that. These are the sliders that work best for balanced teams, but they work best for this system as well. I found it in one of the historic Duke rosters. You can also take and you can modify this some. So if you want to play faster, you could go like 70, 90, 50-50, or you could go 80, 100, 60-60. Now we have my grind city build. This was from our defensive career simulation. In this system, we focus on defense. Defensive intensity is never going to drop below 80. It can be 80 or higher. Your offensive tempo never goes above 60. It can be 60 or lower. It can be all the way down to 0. Your defensive rebounding or fast break should never go above 40. and your transition, defense, offensive rebounding should never go above 40. Your press frequency must be set to always, and you must use full court press, full court trap, or 1-2-1-1 zone. Press is recommended. Some form of half court zone is what you're going to use for your pressure defense. The final system focuses on defense through rebounding, so this is pretty much a modification of the Grind City build. Your defensive intensity is going to stay the same, with your new max for your offensive tempo being 40 and your new max for your defensive rebounding fast break slider and your defensive transition and offensive rebounding slider being 20. With this strategy, what you're aiming to do is limit possessions in the game by dominating the rebounding margin while being very efficient. Ideally for this system, you want to focus on player size. So actually this is for both the Grind City and the defensive players system. You'll want to focus on size. So you want to have point guards at 6'2 plus, 6'5 small forward or shooting guard to play the shooting guard. Then you'll want athletic 6'6 or taller power forwards to play small forward. Then you'll want 2 rim protecting bigs at your power forward and your center position. All players need to be good defenders and rebounders for both systems. Now we will go over some examples of fluid coaching strategies. This is me making up strategies based on what we recruited earlier in the video, instead of using recruits tailored to the systems that we've already talked about. So year one, roster management. Again, roster management is going to be an important part of being successful. This roster isn't a particularly good one. First thing I want to do is edit player positions to make sure my best players are on the court. Next, I want to do my rotations and ensure my best players are getting their minutes. Because we don't have any depth, I want to set this to 7 and then auto-generate rotations and adjust them as I see fit. I need my starters to play at least 35 minutes each and essentially have number 3 and 23 play the entirety of the game. Coaching profile, we want to set this playing small, so I will select the 4-out playbook. We also want to run zone defenses just because we don't have any size to defend with. Pause. Defense and depth are not going to be our strengths. So I want to have modest pressure settings for defense. We want to outscore our opponents, so playing with pace is going to be important. So I'm going to set offensive tempo to 65. Didn't quite want to do 60. Felt like 70 was a little bit too much because we're not playing with a lot of depth. In defense, not a strength, so I'll set that to about 35. We definitely want to run the fast break due to our speed and size. So we'll set this to 90 because we're going to need easy buckets, and we got guys who can handle the ball. Pause. So we need to drive to the rim. I guess that's a pause as well. And lastly, we will need to score on second chance points. Due to size, we aren't concerned with defense like we've already said, so we're going to commit to hitting the offensive glass. Now that we've got all that squared away, we'll need to determine who's taking what shots and how many of them. What you want to consider when allocating shots in the player tendency screen is their offensive awareness, consistency, and what types of shots they're good at hitting. Your awareness means they're going to be less likely to make mistakes and commit turnovers. Consistency means that they'll be more successful more often. Note that shot off the dribble contributes to the ability to hit mid-range and three-point jumpers, while shot in traffic is going to influence the ability to hit close range shots as well as driving layups or dunks. I will want to be sure that number 3 and 23 take whatever shots they're good at. For the supporting players, because we are playing small, I will want to focus on hitting threes in terms of my supporting players. But in the case of center number 54, I will allow him to take close shots just because he's so good at it. It's going to be a high percentage shot for him as well as drive to the basket. Number 5 is an interesting case as he's a non-shooting 6'6" guard. I guess we'll allow him to shoot some close shots and drive because he's tall and he can drive some. He can handle the basketball pretty well. We will mainly run our offense like an old school point guard would. So maybe like a Chris Paul type who takes way less shots would be the type of mold this guy is going to fit in. The results for this year were we went 30-6 on the year, 15-1 in SEC play, and advanced to the semifinals of the SEC tournament. We would claim a 1 seed and advance to the Sweet 16. Number 23 was an All-American. We were the coach of the year. Number 54 was the freshman of the year. We also had a first team All-SEC selection, a second team All-ACC selection, and an All-ACC freshman team selection. Going into year 2, we don't have a lot of depth. So for our roster management, I'm going to have to move number 5 to small forward. He can play a point forward type of role. So think maybe Draymond Green. If you watch college basketball back in the day, Royce White, somebody like that. Now we're pretty deep at center. So I'm going to redshirt one of the freshmen that's coming in. So I'll be able to get an extra year out of him down the line. Here are the rotations. We switched our depth to 9 to start the season. When we get into conference play, we'll want to start to cut this down. Usually you want to play as many guys as you can early in the season to reduce fatigue and injury and to keep those guys happy so that they're getting minutes. So it kind of helps with your roster management because those players they'll stay happy. They'll be less likely to transfer. Then when it gets to nut cutting time, so conference tournament, your NCAA tournament, you'll just want to have your best 7-8 players playing. Our guards essentially have to play the whole game, especially number 5 as he's our best player, and that's kind of wild as a non-shooting guard, so it'd be interesting to see how we fare this year. For our coaching profile, we have more size now, so we can go man-to-man, but I do still like to run a zone matchup for the pressure defense, and I like the 1-3-1 matchup the best. We're playing more guys, so we will run this full court trap occasionally. For the sliders, I elected to go with these. Again, I believe it's from that 01 Duke squad. They work well for balanced teams, but they also work whenever you don't have a whole lot of depth as well. And I want my guys to play like this just because that's how we're going to be playing at the end of the year. Shot selection, number 5 is the best player on the team essentially, so he has to take shots even though he's a non-shooting guard. We will allow him to take close shots and drive to the basket. Number 54 is going to be our other top player on the team. We'll allow him to take more close shots as well as continue to drive to the basket like last year, while also shooting just a little bit from mid-range. Number 1 is our only shooter on the team really, so I'm going to have to let him take a lot of threes and middies. Number 21 will take close shots and drive. He will be our 6th man, so kind of using that 6-man strategy here. You can take a guy who is really good at scoring on 1 or 2 levels, max it out tendency-wise, and he'll contribute a lot off the bench for your offense. I have had all conference players using this 6-man strategy. Number 13 will have to shoot threes just because of our depth issues at guard. Here we are, end of the season. For our results, we went 24-11, made a Final Four, and I forgot to record the awards. Lo siento mucho. Now we're here in year 3. For roster management, the only positional change we'll need to make is switching point guard number 5 back to the point guard position. Greg will go straight into the starting 5 for us. Our rotations here are pretty much going to be the same. We have a very solid 8-man lineup. Pause. For our coaching profile, the best player, again, is going to be our point guard who's good at driving. So I want to switch to a box playbook. Probably should have done this last year. We are good offensively and just shooting the ball in general. So we wanted to focus on tempo and fast break, but not turn them up too high because we have a depth of 8. Shot selection, we're pretty much keeping it the same, except now we have Greg. We want him to take a lot of threes and drive to the basket. For our results, we went 32-9 overall, made a Final Four. The awards for this season included the NCAA and SEC Freshman of the Year for Greg, the SEC Coach of the Year, the SEC Player of the Year, 2 first-team All-SEC selections, 1 second-team All-SEC selection, and an All-ACC Freshman selection. Now here we get into our final season roster management. We did not see any benefit to making any positional changes, so we're just pretty much sticking with what we have. These are our rotations we went with. Because we have a freshman point guard, I wanted to keep him under 30 minutes per game. We can crank this up later as he gets more experience and hopefully a little bit more awareness as the season goes on. Our coaching profile is pretty much going to stay the same though. In terms of shot selection, we decided to play through Leslie a lot, letting him shoot close and mid-range shots and drive to the basket as well as our secondary scorer. Greg is going to pretty much maintain his tendencies from last year. Small forward number 1 is going to be our primary scorer, who's going to take a whole lot of jumpers. The remaining guys are role players and will be allowed to shoot shots they are good at in moderation. Go on to play in the NCAA title game. We finished 27-8 on the year, 12-4 in SEC play. For awards, we had Freshman of the Year, a first team All-American, a Freshman All-American, the SEC Player of the Year, the SEC Freshman of the Year, a first team All-SEC selection, and 2 All-SEC Freshman selections. Alright, so that's it to wrap up the video. I want to thank you guys for watching. I hope I was able to help you out. If you have any questions or maybe I missed something important like I said earlier, let me know in the comments. Please like this video, comment, subscribe for more content, and please check out some of the career sims I have already done. Peace. I'll see you guys next time.